Well, greeting once again, poetry lovers. It's time for part two of our delightful foray into T.S. Eliot's poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Now, at this point, you know what I need to do for you here? Believe I need to tell you that the last presentation, part one, was brought to you by the Blackwing 602 matte finish. Ooh, this is a marvelous pencil. I cannot even begin to describe how great this thing is and how it writes like liquid. Woo, it's awesome. But this time, we're going to go with the Palomino HB in orange. How about that? It's a nice. So the Palomino company bought the rights to make the Blackwing. So I thought we'd mix it up, and we'll use this this nearly Tennessee orange Palomino with a nice white eraser. Ooh, how about that? Okay, so let's get back to the poem. Line 70. All right. So when he says here, how should I begin? So we get the section break, yes? And really, this is our first section break, isn't it? Okay, with those dots. Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? You'll recall this harkens back to the business of him going through the half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels. It's sort of the kind of motel that you wouldn't take a nice lady. I mean, if you were you and your wife are having to stay overnight in some town, I mean, you're not going to a place like this, right? I mean, the motel that rents by the hour. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Okay, one night cheap hotels, sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. I mean, these are the places of the common, the everyday dude. And so the everyday dude makes an appearance now here in this short stanza. What do we call this stanza? With the rhyme scheme of streets being the A line, pipes being the B, windows being the C, claws being the D, and C's being the E line. Check that out. No rhyming at all. That guy stands out by itself. But as you know, the 5-line stanza is called a cinquain. Yep, cinquain. Okay, remember that. Question, gonna ask you. Okay, so the question here is, am I supposed to know about being a regular guy down in this working class part of town? Because we know that he's already characterized himself as being this sort of sort of highbrow, well-dressed dude with his high collar and his silk tie and this sort of thing. Okay, note the loneliness of the crab image, and it's references one of the most prehistoric creatures on Earth. It's armored. It's well beneath the surface of the ocean, by itself. And there's this sense that that the crab is always in a defensive position, and it seems like this is what Prufrock has been with respect to these women. Yes, and of course you cannot miss the allusion to Hamlet, and specifically to who? Polonius, when he says that you could be young like me if like a crab you could go backward. All right, so what I wanted to point out here in terms of the acoustics, okay, this is just an unbelievable. Lonely Men. This is one of the few times where he really kind of goes into, this is the abstraction. Oops, can't write. Okay, loneliness is an abstract concept. Wish I could ask him why he went there. Why doesn't he just say, and watch the smoke that rises from the pipes of men in shirt sleeve. And we're talking about pipes as in smoking pipes, yes? These dudes are just, are they smoking these pipes by themselves? Of men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows. I mean, it's the, we should get the loneliness image just by itself, should not we? Sort of think so. I should have been a pair of ragged claws. So I think that's that allusion to Hamlet, wishing that he could go back, but he can't do it. All right, but notice the sibilants here of the, so scuttling is onomatopoeia, and then you have the S in scuttling, the S in across, floors of silent seas. So what's the sibilants doing there? So I asked you the question about what's the effect of it. Well, it's supposed to evoke the sound of moving water. Bet you I'll ask you that. Bet. Okay, so here we have the implied reference to the cat, the evening that's sleeping so peacefully. And notice again the juxtaposition of how he is engaged so often in what seems like self-soothing to try to calm himself down. Back earlier when he was saying, there'll be time, there'll be time, there'll be time. It's like, relax, relax, there's plenty of time, this sort of thing. Okay, and how the night is sleep so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers. So it's the long fingers of the women, and how they would gently like pet the cat. He probably wishes he was the cat, so they would pet him a little bit. So stretched on the floor. So the evening stretched on the floor. So again, he's animating the evening. Animation. You're going to want to, when you see these places that I've marked the rhyme scheme, go ahead and do it. You've noticed that that he's not gone back to the rhyme couplets. It's more like the interlocking rhyme scheme. It's a sense that there's maybe it's fragmenting. Like, I mean, the rhyme scheme here, it's so singular, nothing's rhyming, as though things don't make sense. He doesn't know how to behave in this particular part of the world. Okay, the A B B A C C D, prayed and platter, that's an E line, matter's an E line, and then flicker's an F line. Notice here that it's his greatness flicker. It's not a flame, and it doesn't radiate. Okay, so this is another day of this endless repetition of his life, in which again nothing is accomplished. Again, wants to act, but can't or won't. More images of paralysis that persist here. The polysyndeton of the tea and cakes and ices. Again, it's the endless parade of meaningless gatherings that are alive with meaningless social gestures. Okay? So, though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, and though I've seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter. So, you know, the business about his head has grown slightly bald. You know, we must acknowledge that he has some sense of humor. I mean, the sort of self-deprecating kind, as he notes. But then here we've got this the head brought in a platter. I mean, this is the allusion to John the Baptist, who you know was sacrificed, was killed on the altar of King Herod, though he Herodias, who you know, loved John. I mean, respected him, but he couldn't appear weak, and so he agreed to do what Salome asked of him, which was to bring him the head of John the Baptist on a plate. Okay, I'm no prophet, and here's no great matter. I've seen the moment of my greatness, so you get the sense that it's like his youth. Flicker, and I've seen the eternal footman hold my coat. So this is metonymy. Then the eternal footman. Okay, it says metonymy for death. Hold my coat and snicker, as though he's getting ready to put it on him. So death is something like a cloak here. So you've got and snickering is the vocal gesture of contempt. And of course, also as an acoustic device, this is onomatopoeia. All right, onomatopoeia. Okay. And in short, I was afraid. So he's glimpsed death and acknowledges its inevitability. Again, you get this explicit reference that he knows his best days, his youth, are behind him. And this long passage, and would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile? Would it have been worth? Would it have been worth? So you've got that sense of antanaclasis, because the meaning changes then. Because you have that change of meaning. And look, here's the anaphora. After the sun sets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets. So you've got the polysyndeton. Told you there's a lot of devices of repetition here, and it's largely because, okay. Oh wait a minute, sorry, got a little bit too. I got a little bit past myself. Okay, so the long passage here that suggests what would happen if he actually did open himself up to this woman that he apparently has his eye on, that she would reject his advances. Okay. The stanza begins the form of a question. This is the first time this happens, where it begins, and would it have been worth it after all? Okay, would it have been worth? It sounds like he's getting ready to ask a question, but he drops it. Never fully forms the question. He can't bring himself to ask her to be his woman, or to be with him, or have sex with him, or whatever it is. It's his ultimate objective. Okay, we have again the allusion to the Andrew Marvell poem, to his coy mistress. I've got another allusion then to Luke 16:19 through 31 and John 11:1 through 44. So all these allusions, and again, this is part of his technique. So here it's a biblical allusion, and here it's a literary allusion. Okay, so two allusions at work there. And then we've got, I shall tell you all, meant at all. So this is another example of epistrophe. That is not it at all. All right, and then so here's the antanaclasis of the would it have been worth it after all, would have been worthwhile. So then you have the anaphora of after the sun sets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets. Polysyndeton again is designed to emphasize the interminable nature of the passage of time. After the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts. Okay, I mean, just look at all that. After the skirts that trail along the floor, and this and so much more. It's impossible to say just what I mean. So not only are the social strictures forbid it, but he's unable to articulate this seemingly to himself. He wasn't even able to articulate the question earlier, and now he's unable to articulate these things that he wants to say to the women in particular. Okay, let's see. So he's essentially restating this earlier supposition. He is in essence wallowing in self-pity and self-loathing, unable to utter the question that he wants to ask, because he started the question again but can't finish it. All right, and now we've got this break. It's as though he is trying to jar himself into something like recognition. to jar himself out of this wallowing self-pity. No, I'm not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Notice he eliminates the I here. So that's an example of am an attendant lord. Okay, all that follows here is ellipsis, meaning that you have left off either the subject or verb of the main clause. And so what he's saying here is by leaving out the I, his identity has been compromised. One that will do to swell a progress. He's diminishing himself into not a heroic type figure who is ultimately at the end, Hamlet at least at the end acted, okay, after being crushed by indecision and paralysis by analysis for the play. But it doesn't seem that that Prufrock is going to make it. That he's going to be able to do what it was that Hamlet did. Okay, so who is it that advised the prince? All right, it's Horatio that advised the prince. Yes. So don't be surprised if I ask you a question about that one. Just so that you remember the stuff that we've read all doggone year. No doubt an easy tool used by somebody else. Deferential, glad to be of use. Politic, cautious, and meticulous. So the idea that he's comparing himself in a certain way to both Polonius and to Horatio. Horatio, of course, is laudable character. Polonius is certainly not. And if we're, so as he tries to muster the strength, but still fails at it, and as he refers to himself at times indeed almost ridiculous, at times the fool. So in the context of Hamlet, then, is this the gravedigger or is this Yorick? Which kind of fool are we talking about? The witty fool? It's hard to say. Okay, so I grow old. I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. So he's alluding to the fact that he is shrinking in physical stature, as we all do. When you get older, you start to get smaller, start to get shorter. So it mirrors his shrinking sense of himself. And so he's got to roll his britches at the bottom because they're getting too long as he gets shorter. So he's saying here, shall I part my hair behind? Again, it's the question. And this is like a comb over, man, right? Do I dare to eat a peach? Can I do anything a young man did anymore? Well, why wouldn't he be able to dare to eat a peach? Is it because perhaps his teeth aren't strong enough to be able to withstand the eating of that ripe fruit? Hard to say. I mean, peaches make an appearance, in spring and summer. Maybe he's past that. Can't enjoy the fruits of his youth any longer. And now here we go to the mermaids. I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. Okay, so the ancient myth of the mermaid luring the man to live with her underwater, which is fine until he realizes that he's underwater, and with that sudden insuck of air or reality, he drowns. So this is prefiguring what happens at the end of the poem. But having heard the mermaids, they're singing to themselves. So even mythical creatures, symbols of fertility and promiscuity, will have nothing to do with him. Nothing to do with him. Okay? All right. So here we go. Last bit. We're less than 100 meters from the finish. I do not think that they will sing to me. I've seen them writing in his imagination. Okay, this combing the white hair of the waves blown back, white hair, which is what happens to old dudes. Yep, echoes the comb over of line 122. Notice also the marvelous alliteration in this particular line. When the wind blows the water white and black. So the W's look like waves. It should be in your mind. And the sound of the water. Then the windy BLs of blows and black. So if the mermaid reference mirrors the way Prufrock has idealized the women, that it's the sense that he has as much chance of getting with them, these mythical creatures, as he does getting with a real one. And so the poem ends with this sort of profound sense of lost and unrealized hopes. And like I said, this business about his fantasy about fulfilling this romantic part of his life, of maybe spending the rest of his life with a woman, and maybe this is it. Okay, so this should harken back to your business about la belle dame sans merci. That his intent, his idea of trying to be with a woman, maybe the problem is that he has idealized them in a certain way, and you have a similar kind of takeaway in this poem that you did from the La Belle Dame Sans Merci, and that is that if you make the mistake of idealizing women in this way, you will be ultimately disappointed. And so this is Wake Us. Notice, I mean, the shift into third person in this concluding tercet. I didn't count it, but if I did, just looking at it on the page, how many times up until here, okay, where he goes third person, and that's not third person like the royal we. If you're to count the number of first person pronouns I that show up, it's dozens of them until this. Okay? So we, he's bringing the reader into this. If you've lasted this long with him, then maybe this is part of the cautionary tale. Again, not unlike the La Belle Dame poem. Okay? We've lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown. So wreaths are like crowns, right? You put them around their head as though you're, the way that you would treat heroic figures. And so maybe this is, again, part of the issue, is that he's idealized them in a way that is not just unfulfilling but impossible, till human voices wake us and we drown. Okay, there you go. Good stuff, guys.